Hi class. I've decided to read a chapter book to you guys, and many of you might have already watched the movie, which was really great. But it's always, I think, better to read the book. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to be sending a chapter at a time. It's A Dog's Purpose. And you don't have to do anything with this except watch. I hope you enjoy it. It's kind of like sitting with me in class watching it. So, A Dog's Purpose. Chapter 1. One day it occurred to me that the warm, squeaky, smelly things squirming around next to me were my brothers and sister. I was very disappointed. Though my vision had resolved itself only to the point where I could distinguish fuzzy forms in the light, I knew that the large and beautiful shape with the long, wonderful tongue was my mother. I'd figured out that when the chill air struck my skin, it meant she had gone somewhere. But when the warmth returned, it would be time to feed. Often finding a place to suckle meant pushing aside what I now knew was the snout of a sibling sneaking to crowd me out of my share, which was really irritating. I couldn't see that my brothers and sister had any purpose whatsoever. When my mother licked my stomach to stimulate the flow of fluids from under my tail, I blinked up at her silently, beseeching her to please get rid of the other puppies for me. I wanted her all to myself. Gradually, the other dogs came into focus, and I grudgingly accepted their presence in the nest. My nose soon told me I had one sister and two brothers. Sister was only slightly less interested in wrestling with me than the brothers, one of whom I thought of as Fast, because he somehow always moved more quickly than I could. The other one I mentally called Hungry, because he whimpered whenever mother was gone and would suckle her with an odd desperation as if it were never enough. Hungry slept more than my siblings, and I did, so we often jumped on him and chewed on his face. Our den was scooped out underneath the black roots of a tree and was cool and dark during the heat of the day. The first time I trotted out into the sunlight, Sister and Fast accompanied me, and naturally Fast shoved his way to the front. Of the four of us, only Fast had a splash of white on his face, and as he trotted gently forward, this patch of fur flashed in the daylight. "I'm special," Fast's dazzling star-shaped spot seemed to be declaring to the world. The rest of him was as molted and unremarkably brown and black as I was. Hungry was several shades lighter, and Sister shared Mother's stubby nose and flattened forehead, but we all looked more or less the same despite Fast's prancing. Our tree was perched on a creek bank, and I was delighted when Fast tumbled head over heels down the bank, though Sister and I plummeted with no more grace when we tried to make the same descent. Slippery rocks and a tiny trickle of water offered wonderful odors, and we followed the wet trail of the creek into a moist, cool cave, a culvert with metal sides. I knew instinctively that this was a good place to hide from danger. But Mother was unimpressed with our find and hauled us unceremoniously back to the den when it turned out our legs weren't powerful enough to enable us to scale back up the bank. We had learned the lesson that we couldn't return to the nest on our own when we went back down the bank. So as soon as Mother left the nest, we did it again. This time Hungry joined us, though once he was in the culvert, he sprawled in the cool mud and fell asleep. Exploring seemed like the right thing to do. We needed to find other things to eat. Mother, getting impatient with us, was standing up when we weren't even finished eating, which I could only blame on the other dogs. If Hungry weren't so relentless, if Fast weren't so bossy, if Sister didn't wiggle so much, I knew Mother would hold still and allow us to fill our bellies. Couldn't I always coax her to lie down, usually with a sigh when I reached up for her while she stood above us? Often, Mother would spend extra time licking Hungry while I seethed at the injustice. By this time, Fast and Sister had both grown larger than I. My body was the same size, but my legs were shorter and stubbier. Hungry was the runt of the litter, of course, and it bothered me that Fast and Sister always abandoned me to play with each other, as if Hungry and I belonged together out of some sort of natural order in the pack. Since Fast and Sister were more interested in each other than the rest of the family, I punished them by depriving them of my company. Going off by myself deep into the culvert, I was sniffing at something deliciously dead and rotten one day when right in front of me a tiny animal exploded into the air. A frog! Delighted, I leaped forward, attempting to pounce on it with my paws. But the frog jumped again. It was afraid, although all I wanted to do was play and probably wouldn't eat it. Fast and Sister sensed my excitement and came stampeding into the culvert, knocking me over as they skidded to a stop in the slimy water. The frog hopped and Fast lunged at it, using my head as a springboard. I snarled at him, but he ignored me. Sister and Fast fell all over themselves to get at the frog, who managed to land in a pool of water and kick away in silent, rapid strokes. Sister put her muzzle in the pond and snorted, sneezing water over Fast and me. Fast climbed on her back. The frog, my frog, forgotten. Sadly, I turned away. It looked as though I lived in a family of dimwits. I was to think of that frog often in the days that followed, usually just as I drifted off to sleep. I found myself wondering how it would have tasted. More and more frequently, Mother would growl softly when we approached. And the day she clicked her teeth together in warning when we came at her in a greedy tumble, I despaired that my siblings had ruined everything. Then Fast crawled to her, his belly low, and she lowered her snout to him. He licked her mouth, and she rewarded him by bringing up food, and we rushed forward to share. Fast pushed us away, but we knew the trick now, and when I sniffed and licked my mother's jaws, she gave me a meal. At this point, we had all become thoroughly familiar with the creek bed, and had tracked up and down it until the whole area was familiar with our odors. Fast and I spent most of our time dedicated to the serious business of play, and I was beginning to understand how important it was to him for the game to wind up with me on my back, his mouth chewing my face and throat. Sister never challenged him, but I still wasn't sure I liked what everyone seemed to assume was the natural order of our pack. Hungry, of course, didn't care about his status, so when I was frustrated, I bit his ears. One afternoon, I was drowsily watching Sister and Fast yank on a scrap of cloth they found when my ears perked up. An animal of some kind was coming, something large and loud. I scrambled to my feet, but before I could race down the creek bed to investigate the noise, Mother was there, her body rigid with warning. I saw with surprise that she had Hungry in her teeth, carrying him in a fashion that we'd left behind weeks ago. She led us into the dark culvert and crouched down, her ears flat against her head. The message was clear, and we heeded it, shrinking back from the tunnel opening in silence. When the thing came into view, striding along the creek bed, I felt Mother's fear ripple across her back. It was big. It stood on two legs, and a horrible smoke